It says the stream is live. There it is. Alrighty. Welcome, everybody, to a very quick and impromptu episode of the Average Intelligence Podcast. I am, as always, your ever present co host, Jake. And today is going to be a little bit of a quick one. I just wanted to, after I make sure you can all hear me, that is. Yep. Cool. All right. So I posted a video on my channel. I think it was last week, a couple days ago. I don't remember. It's been a minute. Um, and I was basically just giving my reaction to the exchange between Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci during a Senate hearing. And there were a couple of people, well, more people posted comments, but there were a couple of people who, I'm going to try to be nice here. This is not going to be a gotcha video. This is literally just me backing up what I said because it was called into question. Unfortunately, one of the comments disappeared. I did not delete it. I don't know what happened to it. There is another person that commented, and this person's, I'm assuming it was a he because of the username. And again, I'm not going to out him. And here's something weird too, because I don't want to get called out for this. Sometimes his comment is there and I can see it, and sometimes it's not. But anyway, I'm going to read the entire comment and then address the questions that he put forth. So anyway, this gentleman commented, "Where is your well-documented evidence that the Wuhan lab has a bad record? Scientists who work there have said there was like another high-level lab with strict protocols." And there he means like the location there, THERE. "More importantly, have you not looked at the cases identified in the US, Italy, and traces of COVID in sewerage in Spain before the outbreak in Wuhan? And finally, did you not see research by Oxford scientists shown the strain in Wuhan is actually an offspring of another strain common in the US and Australia? China didn't blame it on the wet market. It was the West who pushed the bad soup bullshits story. Most of the first batch of people has gone to the wet market, excuse me. China has already said there are cases before this group that didn't go to the wet market at all back in 2020. Okay. First of all, I want to address one thing about the wet market. I'm not saying, or in the video, I should say, I didn't say that the virus came from the wet market. I was saying that the Chinese government said the virus came from a wet market. And that was, of course, turned out to be false. And we know that now. But at the time, and another point I want to make before I get into the written sources here, I get a lot of my news media from audio media and video. So like watching the news and or listening to the news and podcasts, things like that. So I mean, I do read, but most of what I absorb comes from these other media. So I had to search for some sources, but I know I had heard all these before, but again, I wanted sources that I could cite and point here, here, and here for your whoever's points here, here, and here. And all of these articles are cited down below in the description, as is the original video. So let's get right into it. So basically, I took 4 claims out of this. And the first one being, where is my well-documented evidence that the Wuhan lab had a bad record? I will say one thing here. My choice of wording was probably not the most accurate. Instead of saying it had a bad record, I should have said there were legitimate safety concerns. But they did technically have a bad record. But anyway, I digress. So the first thing, and I'm actually going to read this article in its entirety because it's kind of short, and basically the entire thing points to this. This is from the Washington Post, originally published on April 14th, 2020. And it's a piece written by Josh Rogan. It is an opinion piece, but it does cite several already published by the Washington Post studies and quotes and whatnot. So anyway, we'll just get right into it. 2 years before the novel coronavirus pandemic upended the world, U.S. Embassy officials visited a Chinese research facility in the city of Wuhan several times and sent 2 official warnings back to Washington about inadequate safety at the lab, which was conducting risky studies on coronaviruses from bats. The cables have fueled discussions inside the U.S. government about whether this or another Wuhan lab was the source of the virus. Remember, this is April 14th, 2020. Even though conclusive proof has yet to emerge. In January 2018, the U.S. Embassy in Beijing took the unusual step of repeatedly sending U.S. science diplomats to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which had in 2015 become China's first laboratory to achieve the highest level of international bioresearch safety, known as a BSL 4. WIV issued a news release in English about the last of these visits, which occurred on March 27, 2018. The U.S. delegation was led by Jameson Fauci, I'm guessing his name is pronounced Fauss, Fouss, the Consul General, so like a lawyer, Consul, the Consul General in Wuhan, and Rick Switzer, the embassy's Counselor of Environment, Science, Technology, and Health. Last week, WIV erased that statement from its website, though it remains archived on the internet. What the U.S. officials learned during their visits concerned them so much that they dispatched 2 diplomatic cables categorized as sensitive but unclassified back to Washington. The cables warned about safety and management weaknesses at the WIV lab and proposed more attention and help. The first cable, which I obtained, I being the author, also warns that the lab's work on bat coronaviruses and their potential human transmission represented a risk of a new SARS-like pandemic. Again, I want to reiterate, this is written in April 14th of 2020 and by the Washington Post. During interactions with scientists at the WIV laboratory, they noted that the new lab has a serious shortage of appropriately trained technicians and investigators needed to safely operate this high contaminant laboratory, states the January 19th, 2018 cable, which was drafted by 2 officials from the embassy's Environment, Science, and Health sections who met with the WIV scientists. The State Department declined to comment on this and other details of the story. The Chinese researchers at WIV were receiving assistance from the Galveston National Laboratory at the University of Texas Medical Branch and other U.S. organizations, but the Chinese requested additional help. The cables argued that U.S. visitors met with, oh, I'm sorry, a piece of it cut out, but this was unimportant, so I'm going to skip a paragraph. But again, the full article is cited down below. I didn't see this. So anyway, it skips like a small paragraph because it got cut off, but I'll continue. Most importantly, the cable states, the researchers also showed that various SARS-like coronaviruses can interact with ACE2, the human receptor identified for SARS coronavirus. This finding strongly suggests that SARS-like coronaviruses from bats can be transmitted to humans to cause SARS-like diseases. From a public health perspective, this makes the continued surveillance of SARS-like coronaviruses in bats and study of the animal-human interface critical to the future of emerging coronavirus outbreak prediction and prevention. I actually changed my mind because a lot of this is things we've already talked about. So I'm not going to read this entire article, but again, just to save time here. All right, you know what? I changed my mind again. Huh. I'm going to continue reading, sorry. The research was designed to prevent the next SARS-like pandemic by anticipating how it might emerge. But even in 2015, other scientists questioned whether Xi's team was taking unnecessary risks. In October 2014, the US government had imposed a moratorium on funding of any research that makes a virus more deadly or contagious, known as gain-of-function experiments. As many have pointed out, there is no evidence that the virus now plaguing the world was engineered. Scientists largely agree it came from animals. Debatable, but according to this article. And again, remember, this is April 2020. But that is not the same as saying it didn't come from the lab, which spent years testing bat coronaviruses in animals, said Zhao Cheng, I believe. I'm sorry, my pronunciation of Chinese names is abhorrently awful, so I apologize. I will spell it, so if anybody knows better, just let me know. Xiao, and the surname or the family name is, or the other name is Qiang. I believe that's Xiao Cheng. Anyway, a research scientist at the School of Information at the University Sorry. I got a new headset. It died. But you didn't miss anything. It dinged me before. Thank you. Anyway, where were we? Apologize for that. People. Oh my gosh. Shut up. Computers. Ugh. Okay. Gain of function experiments. Okay. As many have pointed out, there is no evidence that the virus now plaguing the world was engineered. Scientists largely agree it came from animals, but that is not the same as saying it didn't come from the lab, which spent years testing back coronaviruses in animals, as Zhao Cheng, a research scientist at the School of Information at the University of California at Berkeley. The cable tells us that there have long been concerns about the possibility. Sorry. The cable tells us that there have long been concerns about the possibility of the threat to public health that came from this lab's research. Notice he says this lab's. He is talking specifically about the Wuhan Institute of Virology. If it was not being adequately conducted and protected, he said. There are similar concerns about the nearby Wuhan Center for Disease Control and Prevention Lab, which operates at a biosecurity level 2, a level significantly less secure than the level 4 standard claimed by the Wuhan Institute of Virology lab, Zhao said. That's important because the Chinese government still refuses to answer basic questions about the origin of the novel coronavirus while suppressing any attempts to examine whether either lab was involved. Again, April 14th, 2020. Sources familiar with the cables said they were meant to sound an alarm about the grave safety concerns at the WIV lab, especially regarding its work with bat coronaviruses. The embassy officials were calling for more U.S. attention to this lab and more support for it to help fix its problems. The cable was a warning shot, one U.S. official said. They were begging people to pay attention to what was going on. No extra assistance to the labs was provided by the U.S. government in response to these cables. The cables began to circulate again inside the administration over the past 2 months as officials debated whether the lab could be the origin of the pandemic and what the implications would be for the U.S. pandemic response in relations with China. And then I apologize, there's a part. There's one other part that got cut out, I'm sorry. But again, you can read the entire article. Okay, and then this is the author speaking again, and this is the last piece of the article here. As my colleague David Ignatius noted, the Chinese government's original story that the virus emerged from a seafood market in Wuhan, point number 4, we'll pick this up later, is shaky. Research by Chinese experts published in The Lancet, which again, I cited this particular medical journal in the original video. The Lancet is specifically the one that I cited, and I believe they're talking about the same article here. Research by Chinese experts published in The Lancet in January showed the first known patient identified on December 1st had no connection to the market, nor did more than 1/3 of the cases in the first large cluster. Also, this market didn't sell bats. She and other WIV researchers have categorically denied this lab was the origin of the novel coronavirus. On February 3rd, her team was the first to publicly report the virus known as 2019-nCoV was a bat-derived coronavirus. The Chinese government, meanwhile, has put a total lockdown on information related to the virus origins. Beijing has yet to provide U.S. experts with samples of the novel coronavirus collected from the earliest cases. The Shanghai lab that published the novel coronavirus genome on January 11th was quickly shut down by authorities for rectification, that's in quotes. Several of the doctors and journalists who reported on the spread early have disappeared. On February 14th, Chinese President Xi Jinping called for a new biosecurity law to be accelerated. On Wednesday, CNN reported the Chinese government has placed severe restrictions requiring approval before any research institution publishes anything on the origins of the novel coronavirus. My main point, again, this proves it, my main point in that video was that anything that the Chinese Communist Party says in relation to COVID-19, or really in general, has to be taken with a massive grain of salt, because they have historically, even when you're just talking about COVID, they have historically distorted or prevented the truth from getting out. This is intentional, going completely against what their scientists were even saying. Where was I? Okay, the origin story is not just about blame. It's crucial to understanding how the novel coronavirus pandemic started because that informs how to prevent the next one. The Chinese government must be transparent and answer the questions about the Wuhan labs because they are vital to our scientific understanding of the virus, said Zhao. We don't know whether the novel coronavirus originated in the Wuhan lab, but the cable pointed to the danger there and increases the impetus to find out, he said. Quote, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's a legitimate question that needs to be investigated and answered, he said. Quote, to understand exactly how this originated, it is critical knowledge for preventing this from happening in the future. And that is the end of the first article from the Washington Post. I'm not going to be reading the full articles from now on, just going to be reading excerpts. But again, all of the full articles can be found in the description below. And then further on to the first point, which again was where is my well-documented evidence that the Wuhan lab had a bad record, I will next be citing, let's see here, what publication was this? This is an article written by John Z, I believe, XIE, April 21st, 2020. And the publication is Voice of America, which is just another news outlet in the United States. A couple pages in, we have a section labeled U.S. Safety Concerned. Nestled in the hilly outskirts of Wuhan, the high-security biosafety laboratory is Asia's first maximum security lab, housing more than 1,500 virus strains. It has also been the source of concern for U.S. officials dating back at least 2 years. Two State Department cables showed that American embassy officials in Beijing made several visits to the research facility and sent 2 official warnings back to Washington in early 2018 about the lab's inadequate safety measures. This was at a time when researchers were conducting risky studies on coronaviruses from bats, the Washington Post reported, citing intelligence sources. Current and former U.S. intelligence officials in recent days also told different news outlets in the U.S. that the intelligence community is examining whether the coronavirus emerged accidentally from the lab and whether patient 0 worked there. However, intel sources told Voice of America that the U.S. intelligence community has not collectively agreed on any one theory, which is fine, that's not the point, for the origin of the coronavirus. While the U.S. investigates, officials say the Chinese government's continuing lack of transparency, including with respect to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, raises questions over how the outbreak began. Officials also accuse Beijing of still not sharing all of their data with the international community. And then immediately under that, Chinese safety concerns. China strongly rejects the possibility that the virus originated in the biosecurity lab instead of from animal to human transmission in Wuhan. Again, proximity is suspect. However, authorities have offered little evidence to back up that claim. Instead, there is Chinese evidence that the lab had safety problems. VOA, Voice of America, has located state media reports showing that there were security incidents flagged by national inspections, as well as reported accidents that occurred when workers were trying to catch bats for study. About a year before the coronavirus outbreak, a security review conducted by the Chinese national team found the lab did not meet national standards in 5 categories. The document on the lab's official website said after a rigorous and meticulous review, the team gave a high evaluation of the lab's overall safety management. At the same time, the review team also put forward further rectification opinions on the 5 nonconformities and 2 observations found during the review. In addition to problems at the lab, state media also reported that national reviewers found scientists were sloppy when they were handling bats. One of the researchers working at the Wuhan Center for Disease Control and Prevention, remember that was the other site that's cited in the Washington Post article, described to China's state media that he was once attacked by bats and he ended up getting bat blood on his skin. In another incident, the same researcher forgot to take protective measures, and the urine of a bat dripped like rain onto the top of his head, reported China's Xinhua State News Agency. And then a new section, in China, no single biosafety enforcer. China's government has long championed biotechnology, but more recently, China's top leader Xi Jinping has made lab safety a higher priority. Xi told leadership meeting in Beijing last February that the country needed to accelerate the introduction of its first biosecurity law, outlining national policies for handling dangerous pathogens. You would think that this would have been done before they opened up a new state-of-the-art lab with the highest safety rating in the country's history, but what do I know? Ah, gosh, that sounded a little like Rush Limbaugh or Ben Shapiro. I'm sorry, but anyway, I digress. I'm just reading, folks. I'm just reading, gang. A draft law has submitted. A draft law was submitted to the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, the nation's top legislative body. That's hilarious. For review in October last year. Yeah, communist country having a legislative body. That's hilarious. An independent American review of China's biosafety controls in 2016 found that the country had a shortage of officials, experts, and scientists who specialize in laboratory biosafety. Beth Willis, the former chairwoman of Containment Laboratory Community Advisory Committee, say that 6 times fast, a citizen lab auto shut. This thing must have like an auto shutdown. I'm sorry. Beth Willis, the former chairwoman of Containment Laboratory Community Advisory Committee, a citizen of Lab Advisory Committee based in Maryland, said the greatest danger to the public from labs housing dangerous pathogens are when lab workers unknowingly become infected and then go into the community. This was speculated very early on that something like this could have happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This actually happened more than once. From the USAMRIID, the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, labs in Fort Detrick, Maryland, while the worker became ill or was hospitalized with a deadly pathogen, that pathogen was not infectious person to person, thank goodness, and an outbreak did not occur, she said in an email to Voice of America. Accidents happen on a regular basis. We've seen a few cases, of high-profile labs in recent years where accidents happened or mistakes were made. For instance, in 2014 at the CDC, there were safety lapses involving the Ebola virus, anthrax, and bird flu. I cited these in the original video as well. And there have been lapses at the NIH, National Institutes of Health, involving variola virus, which causes smallpox, said Dr. Philippa Lensos. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I'm sorry. A biosecurity expert at King's College London. These are just the tips of the iceberg, Lensos said. And then a new heading, Chinese investigations into the origin of COVID-19. While Chinese diplomats and officials have floated a variety of conspiratorial theories about where the outbreak began, the country's foreign ministry has insisted the search must be left up to the experts. China has mentioned many times that the origin of the virus is a scientific question, which should be evaluated by scientists and medical experts, and should not be politicized. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. Zhang Shang, who again, hope I'm pronouncing that right, spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, said at a routine press briefing on Monday. But Chinese officials themselves have produced little data for scientists to examine and have kept the lab and critical parts of Wuhan virtually sealed off from foreign investigators. I don't remember if I told you the original publication date of this article. I believe this was April 21st, 2020, if I remember correctly. Yeah, okay. I think I did mention it, but anyway. The World Health Organization's joint report with China published in late February on the virus's possible origins listed 3 ongoing investigations into the virus's origins, none of which appear to consider the lab as an infection vector. Wonder why? Virology experts interviewed by VOA believe that researchers should not rule out the possibility that the virus entered the human population due to a laboratory accident. A major component of the novel bat virus project at the Wuhan Institute of Virology involved infection of laboratory animals with novel bat viruses, said Richard H. Ebright, a professor of chemical biology at Rutgers University. Therefore, the possibility of a lab accident includes both 1. Scenarios with direct transmission of a bat virus to a lab worker, and 2. Scenarios with the transmission of a bat virus to a laboratory animal, such as a ferret, and then to a lab worker. And it should be noted that ferrets, many of the viruses that affect humans also affect ferrets, so it's reasonable to assume that if a virus can affect a ferret, it can be transferred to human. In fact, COVID-19 can be passed to ferrets, which is why ferret pet owners have had to take extra precautions so that they don't get their pets sick during the pandemic. Biosafety Level 4 labs like the one in Wuhan are the most sophisticated containment labs that are designed to work with the world's deadliest pathogens. However, lab design cannot overcome poor training or human error. This risk is increased if the laboratory is culturing a virus that is readily available to infect humans, particularly via the respiratory tract. As then any droplet caused by a simple splash or aerosolization of liquid can be inhaled unknowingly and infect the operator, said Dr. Nikolai Petrovsky, a professor at Flinders University and research director in Australia. Similarly, if they are wearing gloves that are contaminated and don't take them off properly, this can cause accidental infection. Lastly, if waste material or animal carcasses that are infected are not properly incinerated at high temperature, then this could cause contamination, including, for example, if the waste is dumped in a garbage pile that is frequented by rats or cats, etc., Petrovsky said in an email to Voice of America. Rutgers University professor Ebreit, said in an email to VOA that lab's previous safety violations indicate it is possible infection source. That lab's previous safety violations indicate it is a possible infection source that should be taken seriously. And I'm just going to breeze through to see if we have anything else on that point. I was asked for proof, and I am giving proof. I believe that is the final point for the first. And then the other ones are actually shorter, so we should be able to breeze through those pretty quickly. Sorry, just breezing through real quick, because I sorted all these out by color coordination. Yeah, okay, so that was it for the first point. I think, where was my... Okay, yep. Okay, so the second point that I was questioned about was I was asked if I knew about cases in the US, Italy, and Spain before the outbreak in Wuhan. Well, let's get into it, shall we? So the first article I'm going to cite for this one is from University of California, San Diego Health. This was actually, and the title of this article is Novel Coronavirus Circulated Undetected Months Before First COVID-19 Cases in Wuhan, China. So basically, the assertion was made by this commenter that since there were they found evidence of cases that existed before the first official case in China, that the virus may not have originated in China, which at least that's how I understood it. However, remember how I said that any information taken from the Chinese Communist Party be taken with a grain of salt, and the fact that they were withholding and or hiding information? Well, here we go. I promise this isn't going to be as long. The beginning of the article. Using molecular dating tools and epidemiological simulations, researchers at University of California, San Diego School of Medicine with colleagues at the University of Arizona at Illumina, I don't know how, if you pronounce that in Spanish or not, Incorporated. Illumina, I'm going to say Illumina. Estimate that SARS-CoV-2 virus was likely circulating undetected for at most 2 months before the first human cases of COVID-19 were described in Wuhan, China in late December 2019. Writing in the March 18, 2021 online issue of Science, they also note that their simulations suggest that the mutating virus dies out naturally more than 3/4 of the time without causing an epidemic. Our study was designed to answer questions of how long could SARS-CoV-2 have circulated in China before it was discovered. Notice, still the prevailing hypothesis is that the virus originated in China. Incidentally, for all you history buffs out there, Spanish flu was also originated in China and was a very similar virus to COVID-19. It was a coronavirus. also alleged to have been transmitted from bats to humans somehow, probably through rats, if I had to guess. Let's see. To answer this question, we combined three important pieces of information: a detailed understanding of how SARS-CoV-2 spread in Wuhan before the lockdown, the genetic diversity of the virus in China, and reports of the earliest cases of COVID-19 in China. By combining these disparate lines of evidence, we were able to put an upper limit of mid-October 2019 for when SARS-CoV-2 started circulated in Hubei province, Then another small piece. Regional newspaper reports suggest COVID-19 regional in China. Regional newspaper reports suggest COVID-19 diagnoses in Hubei date back to at least November 17th, 2019, suggesting the virus was already actively circulating when Chinese authorities enacted public health measures. And then another small piece of this article. Based on this work, the researchers estimate that the median number of persons infected with SARS-CoV-2 in China was I apologize, everyone, new headphones, but we'll continue. Based on this work, the researchers estimate that the median number of persons infected with SARS-CoV-2 in China was less than 1 until November 4th, 2019. 13 days later, it was 4 individuals, and just 9 on December 1st, 2019. The first hospitalizations in Wuhan with the condition later identified as COVID-19 occurred in mid-December. Another small bit of this article. Even as SARS-CoV-2 was circulating in China in the fall of 2019, the researchers' model suggests it was doing so at low levels until at least December of that year. Given that, it's hard to reconcile these low levels of virus in China with claims of infections in Europe and the US at the same time. The scientist's name is Wertheim. Wertheim said, I am quite skeptical of claims of COVID-19 outside China at that time. Again, science. So again, the next, I believe there's some, yes. So the next article is from Business Insider, was originally published February 10th, 2021. So this is going back and looking at evidence that we found from back then. And the title of this article, Suspicions Mount that the coronavirus was spreading in China and Europe as early as October, following a WHO investigation. And again, these are just excerpts. Once again, the full articles can be found down below, should you want to partake in reading the entire thing. One analysis based on satellite images of Wuhan hospitals and online searches for COVID-19 symptoms in the area suggests the virus may have started circulating there as early as late summer. Now again, this is not a scientific study. This is looking at satellite data and online searches. A study from Milan's National Cancer Institute also found that 4 of Italy's coronavirus cases dated back to October 2019. Another study suggests the virus reached the US West Coast in December 2019. Although pinpointing the exact date of the virus's first jump from animals to people is impossible without more data, these findings suggest the pandemic's December anniversary is arbitrary, which again, I'm not disputing that. The only thing I'm saying, the timeline's irrelevant to what I was saying. All I'm saying is that it's pretty clear the virus originated in China. The comment was an attempt to kind of disprove that for some reason. I'm not really sure why. But again, same article. Wuhan public health officials initially told the WHO about a mysterious illness that would later be named the novel coronavirus on December 31st, 2019. But government records show China's first coronavirus case happened on November 17th, 2019, according to an investigation by the South China Morning Post. According to SCMP, Chinese medical experts pinpointed 60 coronavirus cases from November and December by reanalyzing samples taken from patients seen during that time. That analysis showed that a 55-year-old man from Hubei that a 55-year-old from Hubei was the first known case of COVID-19 in the world, as far as we know now. Though the disease hadn't been identified yet at the time. Then here another one. A study from researchers at Harvard University did find more people were visiting Wuhan hospitals in the latter half of 2019. The study authors used satellite imagery of the city to measure traffic to 6 city hospitals. They saw an uptick starting in August 2019, which peaked 6 months later. This timeline coincided with the increase in online search traffic for terms like diarrhea and cough, again citing the above aforementioned data. Italy, specifically Italy here, recorded its first official coronavirus case in Lombardy on February 21st, 2020. Yet a recent study found coronavirus antibodies in blood samples collected from 23 Italians in September 2019 and 27th in October 2019, Quote, our results indicate that SARS-CoV-2 circulated in Italy earlier than the first official COVID-19 cases were diagnosed in Lombardy, even long before the first official reports from the Chinese authorities. Again, we know they were withholding information. Casting new light on the onset of the spread of COVID-19 pandemic, the authors wrote. Spain and France also found clues the virus was circulating in 2019. This is where it gets interesting. In May, doctors at a Paris hospital discovered that patients they'd treated for pneumonia on December 27, 2019 had been sick with COVID-19, looked at the data and went back. France didn't record its first official case until January 24th, however. And the last bit from this article, research in the US too offers evidence that the virus had gone global before humanity even knew it existed, which is likely. The US recorded the first coronavirus case on January 20th, 2020. But according to one study, the virus had reached the Pacific Northwest at least a month earlier. Blood samples collected by the American Red Cross in 9 states, including California, Oregon, and Washington, showed that some Americans had coronavirus antibodies as early as December 13th, 2019. Again, what none of this proves, none of these cases suggest that COVID developed anywhere other than Wuhan. All it suggests was that the virus was around earlier than we thought. That's all it means. And then I'm going to zip through a timeline here real quick just to remind everybody. This timeline is from CNN. December 31st, 2019, cases of pneumonia detected in Wuhan, China are first reported to the World Health Organization. During this reporting period, the virus is unknown. The cases occur between December 12th and December 29th, according to Wuhan Municipal Health. January 17th, 2020, Chinese health officials confirmed that a second person has died in China. The United States responds to the outbreak by implementing screenings for symptoms at airports in San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. January 20th, 2020, China reports 139 new cases of the sickness, including a third death. On the same day, World Health Organization's first situation report confirms cases in Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. January 21st, 2020, officials in Washington state confirmed the first case on U.S. soil. That's the official first case. January 23rd, 2020, at an emergency committee, World Health Organization says that the coronavirus does not yet constitute a public health emergency or of international concern. January 30th, 2020, the United States reports its first confirmed case of person-to-person transmission of the coronavirus. On the same day, WHO determines that the outbreak constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. January 31st, 2020, first confirmed case in Spain. It was a German tourist who had been in touch with people who had recently been to China. So there goes the Spain theory. February 2nd, 2020, a man in the Philippines dies from the coronavirus. This is the first time a death has been reported outside mainland China since the outbreak began. February 3rd, 2020, China's foreign ministry accuses the U.S. government of inappropriately reacting to the outbreak and spreading fear by enforcing travel restrictions. February 4th, 2020, Japanese health ministry announces that 10 people aboard the Diamond Princess cruise ship moored in Yokohama Bay are confirmed to have coronavirus. The ship, which is carrying more than 3,700 people, is placed under quarantine, scheduled to end February 19th. February 6th, first COVID-19 death in the United States. A person in California's Santa Clara County dies of coronavirus. but the link is not confirmed until April 21st. February 7th, Li Wenliang, a Wuhan doctor who was targeted by police for trying to sound the alarm on a SARS-like virus in December, dies of the coronavirus. Following news of Li's death, the topics Wuhan government owes Dr. Li Wenliang an apology and we want freedom of speech trend on China's Twitter-like platform, Weibo, before disappearing from the heavily censored platform. February 14th, a Chinese tourist who tested positive for the virus dies in France, becoming the first person to die in the outbreak in Europe. On the same day, Egypt announces its first case of the coronavirus, marking the first case in Africa. February 21st, the CDC changes criteria for counting confirmed cases of novel coronavirus in the United States and begins tracking two separate and distinct groups: those repatriated by the U.S. Department of State and those identified by the U.S. Public Health Network. This is also the same date of the first official case in Italy, as I cited before. February 26, 2020. CDC officials say that a California patient being treated for novel coronavirus is the first U.S. case of unknown origin. The patient, who didn't have any relevant travel history nor exposure to another known patient, is the first possible case of community spread. February 29th, at least. Sorry, this is very annoying. February 29th, a patient dies of coronavirus in Washington state for almost 2 months. This is considered the first death due to the virus in the United States until autopsy results announced April 21st revealed 2 earlier deaths in California. So this timeline has been somewhat updated. And then we jump to April 21st, 2020. California's Santa Clara County announces autopsy results that show 2 Californians died of novel coronavirus in early and mid-February, up to 3 weeks before a previously known first death from the virus in the U.S. And then I do believe that is it for the timeline that I wanted to zip through. Yep, that was it. So we'll start on point number 3, which was citing traces of COVID found in Spanish sewers. Now, there was a little bit on this I wanted to touch on. Just going to breeze through real quick and find there were 2 little notes I had on this. Damn, I apologize, people. I was trying to make this quick, but there was more information than I thought. Okay. The good news is we're wrapping it up here. I promise. Oh, I guess there was only one or 2 bits. By the way, if you like this sort of content, you should definitely like, share, and subscribe, and then go over to the Arate Media YouTube channel, like, share, and subscribe, and you can enjoy our content via YouTube or various audio streaming platforms, which you can find the links in the description. Okay, so there was really only one specific point to the Spanish sewers, which I'm not disputing that, it did happen, but here's an interesting excerpt. This is from the Business Insider article from, what was the date? February 10th, 2021. In Spain, meanwhile, researchers at the University of Barcelona found evidence of the coronavirus in city sewage samples collected in mid-January 2020, 6 weeks before the country's first official case. Surprisingly, a sewage sample collected on March 12, 2019 also tested positive for traces of the coronavirus. But testing wastewater isn't a perfect way to detect outbreaks, as Claire Crossan wrote in The Conversation. So it's possible that the March sample had been contaminated during the study. Just putting that out there. Oh, and also of note, the first case in Spain was actually in the Canary Islands, not Spain proper, not continental Spain. It's just worth noting. And then the last point was that China did not, the last point he made, sorry, is that China didn't blame the virus initially on a wet market. Well, my friend, I'm sorry, that tone was questionable. I said this wasn't going to be a gotcha. Going back to the UC San Diego Health article, just one point from this one. The first cluster of cases and the earliest sequenced SARS-CoV-2 genomes were associated with the Huanan seafood wholesale market, but study authors say the market cluster is unlikely to have marked the beginning of the pandemic because the earliest documented COVID-19 cases had no connection to the market, which the commenter accurately pointed out, but as we'll see in some of the other points, the Chinese government are the ones that were saying that the origin of the virus was likely or they flat out said it was the wet market. And then going back to the Voice of America article, China has said the first infected people caught the virus from live animals being sold in a wet market in Wuhan, Hubei's main city. But since the first public reports of an unusual viral outbreak emerged last December, many observers have also noted that China's first level 4 biosafety lab, which conducts research on animal coronaviruses, is located just a few kilometers from the wet market, which is probably where they drew the conclusion. But wait, I thought it didn't come from a lab. For those of you on the audio platforms, I just raised my eyebrows a little bit. You've got to think critically and read between the lines. And then from the timeline, I will simply cite January 1st, 2020. Chinese health authorities closed the Huanan seafood wholesale market after it is discovered that wild animals sold there may be the source of the virus, per CNN. And then lastly, back to the Business Insider article. All right, gotta flip through the pages here. The World Health Organization team confirmed the virus didn't make its initial jump from animals to humans at the Huanan market. Evidence suggests the virus was circulating elsewhere in Wuhan before the market outbreak happened. Liang Wennan, a member of China's National Health Commission who assisted the WHO investigation, said in a press conference Tuesday. And this article was from February 10th, 2021. So they're right, it didn't occur, but the point I was making was that initially they said that's where it came from. I remember seeing all over CNN, all over YouTube, all over social media, all over news media in general that, oh, it's okay, this came from bats and it happened in a wet market. They should really close those down because they're unsanitary. And lo and behold, now even China admits that the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, did not come from a wet market. So I rest my case. I hope that didn't come off too like gotcha-y because that wasn't my intention. But I just wanted to clarify and back up the points I was making. Little under an hour, but I'll end it here. That was basically just to spread more information. Not trying to spread conspiracy theories, but I am trying to be as accurate as possible. So I was pleased to find a lot of sources corroborating what I was talking about. But anyway, like I said, like, share, subscribe, so you can see the podcast every week. It's normally on Wednesdays. We took a day off to celebrate a birthday at Dave & Buster's, which was super fun and sorely needed. But we will return this Wednesday. And as always, you can check us out on Spotify and various other platforms. Links are in the description, as well as our official merchandise store. And don't forget about our crypto contest, a video outlining the details of that. Oh, the contest ends today. Never mind. Forget about the crypto contest. We might extend it. But anyway, we